Most e-commerce owners think scaling sales means spending more, faster, and everywhere. Like more ads, more platforms, more tests. But here's the weird thing I've noticed after working on hundreds of campaigns. Every brand that actually grows steadily does the opposite. They don't chase traffic. They don't jump platforms. They don't try everything. They find one thing that already works and they scale it carefully, like a money tree, instead of a lottery ticket. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 things. First, how to tell before you scale whether your offer is actually ready for paid ads or if ads are just going to expose the cracks. Second, why Google Ads is usually the safest first growth channel for e-commerce and how to use it to capture demand that already exists instead of trying to manufacture it. And third, where Meta Ads actually fits into your sustainable growth system. So Meta supports growth instead of draining your budget. And to understand why this matters so much, let me show you what I mean. If you had a real tree in your backyard sprouting $100 bills like a money tree, you wouldn't panic or tear it out if it stopped producing. You'd figure out what made it grow. The right fertilizer, the right amount of water, enough sunlight. A good e-commerce store works the same way. The product is sold fruit on the tree. The offer is the soil, and your ads are the fertilizer, water, and sun. When those are aligned, scaling becomes kind of boring. The more you put in, the more comes out. Early e-commerce stores didn't scale the way people are told to scale today. Back then, products sold first, not in massive volume, but they sold. Then paid ads were layered on top of that. What was already working? Growth was slower, but stable. Look at how most e-commerce stores are built today. You launch the site, you turn on ads immediately, and you just hope the algorithm figures it out. And when the sales don't come in, the assumption is always the same. Ads don't work, Facebook is dead, Google's too expensive. But that's not usually the real issue. The order got flipped. Instead of product leads to proof, leads to scale, it became ads leads to traffic, leads to stress. The truth is, sustainable growth has never been about clever tricks. Sustainable growth starts with a proven offer. So before we talk about traffic, before platforms, before budgets even, there's one uncomfortable question every e-commerce store owner has to answer. Does this product already sell? Not could it sell once ads are dialed in, but does it already sell? Even just a little bit. Because paid ads don't fix bad offers. They expose them. This is where most stores get tripped up. Sales are inconsistent, so they assume the problem is traffic. They turn on ads, clicks go up, but nothing else changes. And that's when people start saying things like Google Ads doesn't work for my niche. 9 times out of 10, it's not the traffic that's the problem. It's the offer. Across e-commerce land, average conversion rates sit below 2%. That means most stores lose money the moment they try to scale. A proven offer doesn't mean perfection. It means a few very specific things are true, like people are buying, even if it's modest. You can clearly see why someone would choose the product over the alternatives, and the product actually solves a real problem or desire. When that baseline exists, something important changes. Ads don't feel like a gamble. You're no longer hoping traffic converts. You're turning up the volume on something that already works. That is why sustainable growth always starts here. Not with more spend, not with more channels, but with getting the offer clear enough that traffic doesn't have to be convinced. It just has to arrive. And once that's true, then the channel you choose actually matters. Why Google is usually the first sustainable channel. Once the offer is proven, the next question isn't how much to spend, it's where to spend. And this is where most e-commerce brands accidentally make things harder than they need to be. They start with channels that require convincing before using channels where people are already convinced. That's why for most e-commerce stores, the first sustainable growth channel is Google Ads. Not because it's trendy or because it's easy, it's because of intent. Every day, people go to Google with a problem they're actively trying to solve. So they're not scrolling, they're not browsing, they are looking intently. And that difference changes everything. When someone searches for a product, they're already closer to buying. They've raised their hand, they've told you what they want. And that's why search-based traffic almost always converts more consistently than social traffic. You're not educating from scratch. You're not interrupting their day. And the best part, you can see that demand before you've ever spent $1. Tools like Google Keyword Planner show you exactly how many people are searching for product-related terms every single month, often in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of queries. That means demand already exists. Your job isn't to create it, it's to capture it. And this is why across hundreds of campaigns, the most consistent results usually come from 3 Google campaign types. Search campaigns, showing up when someone types exactly what they want. Shopping campaigns, letting the product, price, and image do the selling. And Performance Max, used carefully as an expansion layer once the basics are working. And when these are paired with a strong offer, results stop swinging. The returns stabilize. Scaling feels safer. And growth becomes something you can plan around. I want to show you what this actually looks like in the real world because this is not theory. One client we worked with sells premium fitness equipment. It's not cheap stuff. This is actually it right here. This is not an impulse buy. Before we got involved, they were selling, but it was inconsistent. Some weeks were decent, but nothing felt predictable. Their question wasn't, how do we grow fast? It was, how do we build one sales channel we can actually rely on? So instead of spreading budget everywhere, we narrowed the focus to one channel. We built around existing demand. We started with Google Ads. Search first because buyers were already looking for this type of equipment. Shopping next because seeing the product, price, and brand up front did most of the filtering for us. No wild experiments, just tightening the alignment between what people were searching for and what the store was actually offering. And here's what happened over time. Returns stabilized about 5 to 1. That means for every $100 that was spent, roughly $500 came back in sales. Not once, not during a lucky week, consistently. And at that point, something shifted. Every additional dollar spent wasn't a risk, it was a decision. They knew what would come back. They could forecast revenue, they could plan inventory, they could grow without holding their breath. And that is what sustainable growth actually looks like. And this only worked because the pieces were aligned. A product people already wanted, an offer that made sense, and a channel that matched buyer intent. Now, this doesn't mean that Google is the only channel that matters, because there's another platform that plays a very different role when you use it the right way, where meta ads fit and where they don't. This is usually where people ask, okay, what about Facebook and Instagram? And this is where a lot of e-commerce advice goes sideways, because Meta doesn't work in the same way that Google does, and it's not supposed to. Google captures demand, Meta creates and shapes it. On Facebook and Instagram, people aren't searching for products. They're scrolling, they're killing time. They didn't wake up planning to buy what you're selling. So if you expect Meta ads to behave like search ads, you're gonna be disappointed. And that's why Meta ads feels inconsistent for so many stores. It's not broken, it's just being used for the wrong job. But used correctly, Meta plays 2 very specific roles. The first is prospecting. That's where you introduce the product to people who don't know you yet. You're creating awareness. You're planting seeds. And the important thing to understand here is this. Prospecting on Meta does not produce amazing ROAS or return on ad spend on day one. That's normal. You're paying to be remembered, not to be chosen immediately. The second role where Meta really shines is retargeting. People who visited your site, viewed your products, added to cart, watched your videos. This is where Meta often turns into one of the highest return channels. Dynamic product ads in particular are brutally effective. You're not convincing strangers, you're reminding interested buyers. That's why stores that lose money on Meta are usually doing one of two things. They're forcing Meta to close sales the offer isn't ready to close, and they're running Meta in isolation without strong search demand underneath it. Meta works best after the offer is proven, Google is stable, tracking is clean, and at that point, Meta doesn't compete with Google, it supports it. When you understand that relationship, something interesting happens. Your channels stop fighting each other and start doing different jobs in the same sales ecosystem. Why Google and Meta together drive steady growth. The most sustainable e-commerce growth doesn't come from picking a side. It comes from understanding how buyers actually behave. Because people don't live on one platform. Think about your own experience. A really common buying path looks something like this. You see a product on Instagram. You don't buy, you keep scrolling, but a few days later you remember it. You open a browser and you search that product name and the category on Google. And that's when the sale happens. From the outside, it looks like Google did all the work, but in reality, Meta ads on Instagram planted the seed. This is why attribution gets so confusing. Meta often influences the decision, Google often closes it. And when you only look at last click data, Meta looks weak, even though it's doing its job perfectly. This is also why stores that rely on just one channel eventually plateau. If you only run on Google, you're limited by existing demand. If you only run on Meta, you're constantly educating and convincing. But when you run both intentionally, Meta and Google reinforce each other. Google captures the high intent buyers who are ready to buy now. Meta builds familiarity, trust, and recall over time. Retargeting bridges the gap between interest and action. So instead of channels competing for credit, they support the same outcome. And once that system is in place, the question stops being, which platform should I use? And it becomes, how do I keep this efficient as I scale? What actually keeps growth sustainable over time. Once the system is working, the goal isn't to scale fast, it's to scale without breaking your business. And this is where a lot of store owners get impatient. They see consistent returns and immediately double the budgets. And that's usually when performance starts slipping. Sustainable growth is boring on purpose. Budgets increase gradually, not emotionally or reactively. You watch return on ad spend, yes, but you also watch your margins. You pay attention to cost per acquisition and fulfillment cost. You don't celebrate revenue that quietly destroys your profit. And at the same time, you keep tightening that foundation. Product pages get clearer, checkout gets faster, friction gets removed one small step at a time. On Meta, creative gets refreshed before it burns out, not because performance crashed, but because fatigue is predictable. Retargeting isn't treated like a cleanup tool. It's used intentionally to increase lifetime value, not just recover carts. And maybe most importantly, paid ads are treated like a campaign. They're treated like, well, as I mentioned before, a money tree where the offer does the heavy lifting. The channels have defined roles, and scaling is a series of small, boring decisions. Because when growth is built this way, it compounds. Not in spikes, just quietly, month after month. And once you experience that, you stop asking how to grow faster, and you start asking, how do you keep this stable while spending more? Now, this is not just think tank theory. This stuff actually works. If you want to hear a story of how one company scaled from hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to $4 million in revenue in a few short years, check out this interview I did with the founders of Paddle Smash. All the best.